Part 1. The Morning That Changed Everything. At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943, the tropical heat at WWII airfield in New Guinea clung to everything: metal, uniforms, skin. Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched beneath the left wing of a P-38 Lightning, watching Lieutenant Robert Hayes perform his final pre-flight checks. Hayes was just 23 years old, with 6 combat missions behind him and not a single kill to show for it. Ahead of him, somewhere beyond the jungle haze, were 18 experienced Japanese Zero fighters waiting to intercept. The P-38 was powerful, fast, heavy, and flawed. It simply could not match a Zero's agility in a turning fight. American doctrine was clear: never turn with a Zero. Dive, strike, climb, escape. But in real combat, doctrine evaporated the moment tracers carved the sky. In the past 6 weeks alone, 37 P-38s had been lost. Pilots blamed themselves. Manuals blamed tactics. McKenna blamed the machine. Deep inside the Lightning structure ran control cables with a tiny amount of slack, just enough delay between stick input and roll response to cost a pilot his life. Engineers dismissed his concern. Regulations forbade unauthorized changes. So the night before, McKenna did the unthinkable. He installed a small bent piece of piano wire, a makeshift tensioner, secretly fixing the flaw. Now, as Hayes climbed into his cockpit, McKenna stood frozen between fear and hope, because what happened in the next 17 minutes would determine whether he had saved a life or doomed one.
Part 2. The Losses That Broke the Rules. The first man McKenna couldn't save was Lieutenant David Chen, bright-eyed, optimistic, fresh from training. 3 weeks in the theater, and he already carried scars on his aircraft from a Zero that had nearly killed him. Chen had described something strange, a lag, a hesitation, like the aircraft wasn't responding fast enough to survive. Weeks later, Chen died in a different P-38 while trying to outmaneuver a Zero over a ball. The official report blamed pilot error. The second loss cut deeper. Captain William Morrison, a respected ace with 11 confirmed kills, died on August 3rd after radioing mid-combat, "Controls feel mushy." His aircraft was inspected. Everything was within specification. His death, too, was filed under pilot error. But McKenna knew better. By mid-August, 17 pilots he had worked with were gone. Some he'd known only minutes. Others he'd talked with nightly while working on their aircraft. All told the same story. The P-38 hesitated when it needed to react instantly. Night after night, McKenna heard the same painful questions echoing in his head. How many deaths were preventable? How many were caused not by enemy skill, but by a fraction of slack? One night, a young pilot asked him, "Is there anything you can do to make her turn faster?" That single question became the breaking point. Part 3. One Piece of Wire. The hangar was silent the night McKenna returned after midnight. Crickets buzzed outside. A distant generator thumped like a heartbeat. Inside Hayes's P-38, McKenna inspected the cables, 3/8 of an inch of slack. Enough to kill. From a scrapped aircraft, he had saved a small length of high-tensile piano wire, 6 inches long, strong, flexible, perfect. He bent it slowly into a rough Z shape, hands shaking, not from fear, but from the knowledge that one wrong decision could mean prison. Blood beaded on his thumb as the pliers slipped. He wiped it away and kept working. For long minutes, he worked blind inside the tight boom cavity, wrestling with bolts and clevis pins. Sweat rolled down his back. Finally, the pin seated.
The cable tightened. The slack was gone. He tested it. Immediate movement, no hesitation. For the first time in months, something felt right. At 1:15 a.m., McKenna walked out under the humid night sky, unsure if he had just saved a life or gambled one.
Part 4. The Flight. At dawn, Hayes walked toward the P-38 with the posture of a man already imagining his fate. He didn't know what McKenna had done, only that he had asked for help and trusted the answer. At 7:42 a.m., the lightning roared down the runway and lifted into the rising sun. McKenna stood motionless, watching until the aircraft became a silver dot. Then came the waiting. Minutes felt like hours. Every mechanic on the line worked, but their eyes flicked to the sky, listening, searching, hoping. At 8:14 a.m., Hayes' squadron made contact. 4 P-38s against 9 Zeros. Hayes dove first. He lined up his target, fired. The Zero rolled away. Hayes followed. And then, something impossible happened. The P-38 rolled instantly. No hesitation, no lag. For the first time in combat, the Lightning moved like a true fighter. Hayes got on the Zero's tail and fired a perfect burst. Kill number 1. Seconds later, another Zero reversed toward him. Hayes pulled hard. The plane snapped through the maneuver. Kill number 2. A third Zero tried to trap him in scissors. Hayes matched every roll. Kill number 3. 7 minutes. 3 kills. No damage. When Hayes finally landed at 9:03 a.m., he didn't speak. He just walked straight to McKenna. He looked him in the eyes and said 2 words. It worked.
Part 5. The Secret Spreads. Word didn't whisper. It exploded through the squadron. Pilots who had spent weeks feeling helpless suddenly saw hope. Aircraft that had felt heavy and slow were now agile and sharp. Captain Frank Mitchell, a respected flight leader, had watched Hayes' performance from altitude. The maneuvering was impossible. No P-38 should turn like that. After landing, Mitchell marched to the maintenance bay. What did you do to his aircraft? McKenna told him everything, quietly, reluctantly. Mitchell didn't hesitate. Do it to mine. Within days, more pilots requested the same modification. Some mechanics refused, too risky. Others, like McKenna, were done watching their pilots die. By August 20th, 9 aircraft had the hidden wire installed, and soon the results began stacking like tallies in a war no one had planned, but everyone now believed in. Part 6. The Results No One Could Ignore. On August 22nd, Hayes scored 2 more kills. Mitchell, 3 days later, 3 kills in 1 mission. Pilots who had gone months without success now returned with smoke-streaked uniforms and shaking hands, whispering, "The controls, they finally respond." The Luftwaffe had been beaten by engineering. Now the Zero, king of maneuverability, was losing its throne. Kill ratios shifted. July, Americans lost 2 P-38s for every Zero destroyed. August, nearly 1.3 to 1. September, even. And pilots knew why. Not new tactics, not new training, not better fuel. Just 6 inches of wire. Hidden. Illegal. Life-saving.
Part 7. The Officer's Notice. By September, too many aircraft were returning with performance inconsistent with official factory tolerances. Maintenance inspections revealed strange tension readings. Too perfect, too uniform. The engineering officer began asking questions. Mechanics played dumb. Pilots refused to talk. Some removed the wire before inspection, then reinstalled it afterward. But secrecy can only survive so long. One morning, an inspector spotted a Z-shaped tensioner still installed. A report was filed. A chain reaction began. But by then, the Japanese had already noticed too.
Part 8. The enemy reacts. Japanese pilots were the first to truly understand that something had changed. Their combat reports shifted in tone, from confident to surprised to alarmed. One of Japan's most feared aces, Saburo Sakai, with 64 kills, engaged a P-38 near Wewak on September 3rd. He executed one of his trademark reversals, a maneuver that had trapped P-38 pilots countless times. But this time, the lightning reversed with him. So perfectly, so unexpectedly, Sakai nearly collided with it. For the first time in 2 years of war, Sakai was forced to break off and flee. His shocked after-action summary ended with the single unsettling line, "American aircraft now maneuver faster than before."
Part 9. A change no one could hide. By late September, the effect was undeniable. The 11th Japanese Air Fleet lost 38 fighters in combat with P-38s that month. American losses, 22. For the first time in the Pacific, P-38 pilots weren't just surviving, they were winning. Japanese command issued new orders, quote, "Avoid engaging P-38 fighters unless holding numerical advantage," unquote. The hunter had become the hunted. And yet, officially, nothing had changed. No upgrades, no training revisions, no factory modifications. Just a silent network of mechanics risking their careers to save the men they worked beside.
Part 10. Discovery. In early October, a maintenance inspector finally documented the modification formally. A report was escalated to headquarters. Engineers at Lockheed were stunned, not because the solution was wrong, but because it was so simple, and they had missed it. Debate erupted. Should the mechanics be court-martialed? Should the modification be adopted officially? Should headquarters pretend none of this happened? Meanwhile, squadrons quietly continued installing it, because out in New Guinea, one truth mattered more than regulations. It saved lives.
Part 11. Engineers step in. In November 1943, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea to evaluate the field modification firsthand. They ran stress tests, measured loads, flew test flights. Their conclusion shocked command. This should have been part of the original design. A redesigned controlled tensioning system was built into the next production variant, the P-38J. But there was no mention of the man who made it possible.
Part 12. The war moves on. With the modification standardized, P-38 units across the Pacific saw dramatic improvement. Pilots who once feared close-quarters combat now held the advantage. Hayes became an ace, 11 confirmed kills. Mitchell rose to command a squadron, finishing the war with 16 victories. McKenna? He kept working quietly, tightening bolts, replacing hoses, checking tires, just as he had before. No medals, no ceremony, no mention in any official document. But among pilots, there was a different kind of honor. A nod, a handshake, a quiet thank you.
Part 13. After the war. The war ended in 1945. Hayes returned to Iowa, married his high school sweetheart, became a crop duster, and raised 4 children. Mitchell stayed in the Air Force, eventually retiring as a colonel. And McKenna? He left the service in 1946, returned to California, and opened a small auto repair shop. To neighbors, he was just Jim, the guy who fixes carburetors. But once a year, on August 17th, the phone in his office would ring. On the other end would be the voice of a man he saved. Jim, thank you. Part 14. A Forgotten Legacy. For decades, the story faded. The official history credited Lockheed's engineering team. No manuals referenced the modification. No award noted the field innovation. No museum displayed the wire. McKenna never corrected anyone. When asked about the war, he simply said, "I fixed airplanes, that's all." But history has a way of resurfacing truth. Part 15. Rediscovered. In 1991, a military historian studying maintenance logs noticed repeated references to a field tension modification. Curious, he tracked down surviving pilots and eventually found James McKenna, then 73 years old, still working part-time in his garage. When asked whether the story was true, McKenna simply nodded. It wasn't genius. It was necessary. The historian estimated the modification may have saved 80 to 100 American pilots. McKenna didn't react. He only said, "I remember the ones who came home." Part 16. The Final Years. McKenna spent his remaining years in quiet routine, fixing cars, helping neighbors, rarely speaking of the war. To most people, he was ordinary. But to the pilots whose lives he changed, he was the difference between funerals and futures, between folded flags and family dinners, between silence and memory.
Part 17. The End of the Story. James McKenna passed away in 2006 at the age of 88. His obituary mentioned his military service. It did not mention the piano wire, the modification, the pilots he saved, or the tactical shift he helped create. His garage still stands. A different owner runs it now. On a back wall, in a frame almost hidden from view, hangs a faded photograph. A young mechanic in oil-stained coveralls stands beside a P-38 Lightning. On the back, in neat handwriting, August 1943, New Guinea. Part 18. What it means. War history is full of famous commanders, brilliant engineers, and heroic pilots. But sometimes, change comes not from authority, but from someone who sees a problem, understands it, and refuses to accept the cost of inaction. McKenna didn't change the course of the war alone, but he changed the fate of every pilot who ever climbed into a P-38 with that small piece of wire hidden beneath the metal.
Part 19. The Truth of Innovation. Innovation rarely begins in conference rooms or laboratories. It begins with frustration, observation, pattern recognition, with someone saying, "This isn't right," and no one else is fixing it. Sometimes that someone is a scientist. Sometimes it's a commander. And sometimes it's a mechanic with dirty hands and a stubborn conscience.
Part 20. The Legacy. Today, aviation historians credit the modification as one of the quiet but pivotal turning points in the air war over the Pacific. It didn't appear in textbooks, it didn't earn medals, but it saved lives and changed the confidence and capability of hundreds of pilots. The Zero, once unmatched in maneuverability, finally had a rival. Not because of new engines, not because of policy, but because of 6 inches of wire.
Part 21. Why stories like this matter. History is often told through grand strategies, powerful speeches, and decisive battles.
But the truth is simpler. War is changed by people. Individuals. Moments of courage no one was supposed to take. Stories like this remind us that the world doesn't only turn because of orders, but because someone chose to do the right thing when no one was watching.
Part 22. The Final Words. If you're watching this now, one thing is clear. The story stayed alive, not because it was written in records, but because it mattered to someone. To every pilot who returned home, to every family spared a telegram, to every mechanic who wondered if their work made a difference, it did. And today, because you watched, listened, and remembered, McKenna's legacy survives. If you found this story powerful, like, comment, and subscribe. Not for numbers, but because every forgotten act of courage deserves to be remembered.